Yes, okay. Excellent. Okay, good. Great. So first thing we're going to do today is to do a task. Do you have a piece of paper, everyone? If you have a piece of paper, great. If not, there's no problem. If you have a piece of paper, I would like you to draw round your hand on a piece of paper. If you don't, you can write on your actual fingers, or you can just imagine what you would write. This is a task that we can do in our classes, and students usually really love this. When you've got your hand, I want you, number 2, to think of 5 really important problems in the world and or in Ethiopia or your country if you're not in Ethiopia today, and write the name of each of the problems on each of the fingers in the drawing or on your real hand. Okay, just 1 or 2 words. Then when you're in class with students, if they do this, they can all hold up their problem hand and then get all the others around them to suggest solutions to the problems. So that's a really nice task to introduce the Sustainable Development Goals to class and to get students discussing them and thinking about them and thinking about, more positively, solutions to these problems. Now, looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, look at or think about the problems that you noted down. Are they all included here on this screen? So these are the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Just have a look through to familiarize yourself with them. And if you have a hand on a paper, think about the problem that you mentioned for each finger and add the number of each problem. For example, if you said women are not equal to men, you would add the number 5 because this is Sustainable Development Goal number 5. Have a look for a minute and add the numbers to the problems on your hand. Okay, were all the problems you mentioned included here? I think they probably were, but some of them may be hidden within other problems. Over to you, Joseph. Joseph, sorry, can you unmute yourself?
Thank you very much, Linda. And the next point will be the what. And here I'll try to cover the history of this Sustainable Development Goals of 2030, infographics and progress. So to start with, let me just start from the very beginning of this Millennium Development Goals. In September 2000, leaders of 189 countries came together at the headquarters and signed the historic Millennium Declaration. This declaration was meant to give a set of 8 measurable goals. These goals range from sharing extreme poverty and hunger to promoting gender equality and reducing child mortality, which was targeted up to the date of 2015. At the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development, Rio+20 in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, in June 2012, member states adopted a set of SDGs to build upon the Millennium Development Goals. The Rio+20 outcome also contained other measures for implementing sustainable development. In January 2015, the General Assembly began negotiation process on the post-2015 development agenda. The process culminated in the subsequent adoption of the 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development with 17 SDGs at its core. That is up to the story, the history of Sustainable Development Goal. The next point is about infographics. An infographic, or we call it information graphic, is a visual representation of, it could be information or data. It is used to engaging visuals to communicate information quickly and then clearly. The third point is about the progress. Obviously, I could say a lot about this one, but for the interest of time, data show that efforts have been exerted, but needs more effort to meet the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals agenda. That's all for this time, and over to you, Linda.
And as you were talking, I was showing some of this really interesting information on the website. I hope you managed to see it. And if you go to that website, maybe yourself or with your students, you can see a lot more information. Thank you.
Okay.
So why should we focus on the Sustainable Development Goals in class? I think it's a really good idea because they remind us what is real and important in the world. All the important countries got together and decided on these goals, and because they're real, they're authentic. It's not made up, invented stuff to do in class. It's real. It's important locally and globally. All of them are relevant to everyone, and I think they're far more worth spending time on in class than many other topics. So how could you use these Sustainable Development Goals in class? Let's have a look at a few ideas. Here are a few ideas and things you can do with them. You could get the students to define them, or give one to each small group of students and get them in pairs to go away, define them, come back and present to the class. You could match them, match the title with the picture, or match the description with the title or the picture. You could get students to describe them. You could get students to research on the internet and check the progress. And this is interesting because it could be the progress locally in your area, in your school, in your college, in your town, or it could be globally in the world. This is like zooming out and then zooming back in again to your local area. You could get students to illustrate them. We don't have to use the United Nations illustrations. And then we could get students to rank them. Ranking is a brilliant classroom activity because there is no right answer. You can, first of all, get students in groups of 3, for example, to put the Sustainable Development Goals in order of how important they are in the world, or of how important they are locally, or of how interesting they are to them, the students, or of how near achieving them the world is, or how easy they are to achieve. You can rank on all those different types of scales, and it's a really good way of getting students to talk. Of course, you can relate them to the local area. Look out of the window. Can you see any of these Sustainable Development Goals? What about life in the sea? What about life in the ocean? What about life on land? What about gender equality? You can do project work on them. And you could do a hand protest. Let's have a look at this. Second task of this webinar, and this is related to the first one, and this is called radical phonology, where we're not writing problems, we're writing something that the students feel very, very strongly about. Is there anything that you would like to protest about? I know I'm lucky I'm in London and I can protest freely without worrying. We're not talking about international or even national protests. We're just going to do a little mini protest in the class. What do you feel so strongly about you'd like to protest about? Students in pairs or 3s can get together and decide, and then they can write on their hand or on a paper hand the words that they'd like to chant at the protest. Have a look at my examples here. On my real hand there, I've got water is precious, save it. And that's something relating to clean water. It's something I feel very strongly about, and I could chant that at a protest. The other one is build bridges, not walls. And this is about refugees, letting the refugees come in and building bridges to help people rather than walls to keep people out. When your students have got these protests ready, you can help them work on the pronunciation. And this is very clearly working on pronunciation in context of sounds, of stress, of intonation, and then they can chant their protests and join in each other's. And this is a very personalized task as well. It's what they think is important. Okay, would those tasks work in Ethiopia, Joseph?
Well, Linda, you were talking about, protesting. Just you can do it because you're in the UK. That's the signal. But just let me go to, the slide anyways. It's about the publication that we would like to share to language teachers. Here, the publication that is displayed on the screen, entitled as Integrating Global Issues in the Creative English Language Classroom, which really provides innovative ideas for teaching. It also gives awareness of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This publication, of course, has two major aims or objectives. The first one is it helps students learn a language creatively. Apart from this, it can be used to raise awareness of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals through bringing together a range of innovative ideas for teaching creatively and addressing the key issues. So this is recommendable for all teachers, and it's a free downloadable publication that they can download it. And we can also share this one to the WhatsApp and Telegram account as well.
Yeah, it's very practical as well. Lots of practical classroom activities that people can use.
Mm-hmm. The next part is, I think it's also my part, and there are also English Connectors webinars. Teachers can use them by adapting or adopting into their classroom situation. As you can see, the first one says empowering learners through sustainable development goals. Here, the recordings are about policies and practices that are crucial to English language teachers. These webinars can be used for teachers of primary, secondary, and young adult English language learners. The second one is education and climate change. Climate change through connecting storytelling and environmental crisis in the EFL classrooms. This webinar helps teachers help to make their class interesting and attractive by integrating environmental stories and climate issues in the EFL classrooms. The third one is education exchange through climate change and goals education. In this panel webinar, teachers can consider how climate is really affecting girls' education around the world. Therefore, those webinars can be used to supporting the real classroom situation. So still teachers can get the access. They can download for free, and then they can squeeze or use them the way that can suit their classroom situation. Thank you, Linda. Over to you.
Yeah, they're really interesting, those webinars. I highly recommend them. And we also, from the British Council, have a lot of ready lesson plans. Sometimes it's difficult to make your own lesson plan. So have a look at these. There are 5 here. And I'd like you to look through and choose one that would be useful for your class. As you see, 1, 2, and 3 are for primary classes. 4 and 5 are for secondary. Have a quick look. Which one would you choose? I think there's probably something there for everyone, for every class. Number 1 is introducing the Sustainable Development Goals for primary. Really nice lesson. Number 2, World Food Day. Everybody likes and is interested in food, but especially around the world. Number 3 is nice, and this is She's a Policeman. So a man, but she. So this is obviously about gender equality and the fact that women can do all jobs. Plastic free, this is going up to secondary, more complex idea. And of course, we need to work on not using so much plastic, using sustainable produce instead. And number 5, all teenagers, for example, are interested in sports. And if you add sports to the climate crisis, this makes the lesson very interesting for learners. These are one-off lessons. How do they relate to the curriculum in Ethiopia, Joseph?
Okay, Linda. Just to give some background about this one in response to the invitation made by the United Nations Economic and Social Council to the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia in August 2016 to engage in the 27th 2017 voluntary national review, the government of Ethiopia has been volunteered to prepare the 2017 voluntary national review on sustainable development goals, and proceeded with the review process by following the proposal for common reporting guidelines of the Secretary General. Here, the main point is, let's talk about the curriculum or the books we use in Ethiopia. The books or curriculum we use in Ethiopia incorporate various topics like environmental science, environmental protection, environmental challenges, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, social entrepreneurship, indigenous knowledge, like local pathways to global development, health and fitness, cultural values, among others. For instance, like to mention quite a few of like the topics that are emphasized or that are used in various books in Ethiopia that started from primary all the way to tertiary levels. In teaching, for instance, students about environmental science or environmental protection or challenges, they can understand the causes and impacts and actions that can mitigate the environmental problem. This would fit with Sustainable Development 13, Climate Action. In teaching a course in human rights, using a video to introduce human rights declaration, students can enhance the Universal Declaration, which can fit with the Sustainable Development 16, which is peace, justice, and strong institutions. So the Ethiopian curriculum from primary to tertiary levels incorporates various sustainable development goals into the classroom situation. One thing is that by implementing those sustainable development goals, there is going to be also an opportunity for Ethiopian students to have international exposure, right? So these are like the points that I would like to raise about this one, and over to you, Linda.
Great. I think you're really lucky then in Ethiopia if your course books cover all this up-to-date, relevant knowledge, which is great. Lucky.
Sure.
There are lots of teachers who don't have those opportunities, and maybe we want to bring them in more. So I've got some more ideas here of when to include the SDGs. Suggestions here. Number one is that you have a warmer, a class warmer for every lesson or every week, and you work through the 17 SDGs, maybe 5 minutes at the beginning of each lesson, not a lecture from the teacher, but maybe students asking questions, discussing them, matching them, some of those activities we looked at beforehand. Or it could be students presenting one in turn, just for that 5-minute warmer. My second suggestion is that you dig deeper into these traditional ELT topics. For example, everyone does food, but are you doing it in a superficial way, just naming the food? Or are you looking at these deeper ideas like the food miles? How much does the food travel to come to you? How much water is used in each of these different foods? How much energy and land is used to produce each type of protein, for example? So looking at its effect on the world. We all do weather, but what about the climate crisis, now called global boiling, because it's getting so bad? Who causes it? What can we do to mitigate the changes? Clothes, see, we all do clothes, but what about the cradle to grave life cycle? Where were the clothes produced? What about the working conditions for the people producing them? What are they made from? Are they recycled? What happens to them when they get thrown away, for example? And then finally, transport, very common topic. Are we just talking about cars, trains, for example, or are we talking about how sustainable they are, how clean the energy is that we use for them, and how this affects the world and the Sustainable Development Goals? Another way of bringing in the Sustainable Development Goals is through special days. Did you know that the 22nd of September is World Car-Free Day? And then the 1st of October is World Vegetarian Day. In November, there's the International Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women. And if our English classes can stop violence against just one woman, it will be worth it, because this is an awful thing to happen. And if we can create some change through raising awareness and informing people about these types of special days, then it's a really good thing. If you would like more information about these special day lessons for special dates in the calendar, have a look at this link. It's the IATEFL GSIG, Global Issues SIG link, and it's in the resources of special days. And there are lots of free lessons to download on lots of these different special days throughout the year. Over to you, Joseph. What about where?
Where? Very good question. But concerning about the points that you are raising, especially when to use warmer and deep, dig deeper. Most of our curriculum, they focus on the second one. As far as my knowledge is concerned, it's about dig deeper. Okay, having said this one, let me come to this point where, well, I could say it could be in a classroom, outside a classroom, indoors or outdoors. Most likely it's really good to form various clubs in the school. Of course, almost the private and governmental schools in Ethiopia have various clubs. For instance, I know that schools have environmental club, English club, charity club, mini media club, and others as well. So those who work in the area of environmental club, they just work beyond, they don't have, they just go out of, the box. Like they may start from their classroom, cleaning from their classroom and from their compound, school compound. And quite some of them have the courage to go out and then create awareness to the villagers and to be working in the cleaning or like knitting the places or the villages to the villagers. And plus, because we know that Addis Ababa in English means new flower, and even at the government level, the government has been striving to be working in the area to make Addis Ababa, which can fit its name. So even it's working, I know like a lot of teachers who are really interested in collaborating students and cleaning, various places, especially, places which are very dirty, and they go and then take the responsibility and do that one. So I don't think it will be limited to only to the classroom, but it has to be beyond that. Thank you, Linda.
Great, I quite agree. These are really, really useful to go out of the class. And then to who, does it have to be the teacher all the time? Definitely not. In fact, it's much better if it's the learners. And if you bring the Sustainable Development Goals into class and give them an opportunity to discover them, you might well discover their passions and interests and start them on a lifelong journey in fighting for something, creating some change. Of course, you can invite visitors into class, in person maybe, or online, virtual visitors, and these activities you can have together. For example, this picture here, the school garden, this was in Kenya. Yeah, this is great to hear that you do these as well in Ethiopia. But are the SDGs too problematic? Are they too gloomy or depressing? Or sensitive, upsetting, taboo, political, dangerous? People say a lot of things about these topics, and when you look at them in detail, then they probably are. But if you're looking at solutions to problems, that's not the depressing side, that's the empowering side. Students may well get really miserable about the world and what we're all doing to it by themselves, but if you focus on finding solutions and working towards progress, then that will be better. If things are too upsetting, if they're too political or dangerous, don't do them in class then, or check with your manager if you should bring these topics in. Sensitive, upsetting things, sometimes it's nice to bring them into a nice supportive classroom. It's better than talking about issues like that for the first time outside class maybe. And here are another couple of links. This positive negatives, which is about refugees, but it's done in a very interesting way with comic animations. I don't know if your students like animations and short films. Have a look at that website. And another one there, the story of stuff. This is about consumerism and how maybe the story of a bottle of water, the story of those little tiny microbeads, little beads of plastic which get everywhere in the world now. and it's about how we can be aware of the stories and hopefully stop them. Here's another approach. Joseph?
Over to me. This is slide 18, which deals with cooperative learning. As the name indicates, cooperative learning is a teaching method that contains concepts and practical strategies to help students learn and achieve other important goals. The goals can be making progress towards the sustainable development goals and simple goals such as feeling satisfied. The ones shared here are the cooperative learning principles like positive independence, individual accountability, all the way to group autonomy. So you can, like, teachers can go through them by downloading the book freely. This free downloadable publication can also explain the links between sustainable development goals and cooperative learning. So teachers, they can explore for more information about cooperative learning, all the principles, plus how they can link the sustainable development goals with that of cooperative learning. So it's a free downloadable resource. They can download it and then they can use it in their classroom. They can read it initially and then share the information to their students. So it's really helped us a lot. I really liked the book and enjoyed it. So, Linda, over to you.
That's the second book, 2 free books today. Okay, I'd just like to say that in about 10 minutes, we'll be finishing this and then we'll be answering questions. If you have any questions, please write your questions in the chat and then we'll be very happy to discuss and answer your questions when we've finished. We've got another 10 minutes or so now. And this is task 3, and this is all about telling stories. I would like you to use all your creativity now and imagine that you are the ocean. And then imagine that you can speak. What is your story? And what would you say to humans if you could speak? Think about that for a minute or so. And if you want to, you can write what you would say in the chat and we can have a look at that afterwards. Okay, would you be happy with humans? Would you be angry with humans? Would you tell humans to go away and stop interfering with the wonderful, beautiful water and life under the ocean? Very nice predictive task for students to do, maybe in pairs. And then you can lead on these amazing short videos. Now, this is through conservation.org, and the whole project is called Nature is Speaking. And they have the most amazing 2 to 3 minute videos. They are all spoken by famous actors in amazing, wonderful voices. If you see Harrison Ford is the ocean, Julia Roberts is Mother Nature, and they are beautiful, beautiful films. Now, you may have a screen in your classroom where you can show these. You may not. You may just have your phone. And if you have your phone, you can get it on your phone and you can use a box around your phone to amplify the sound and just play that short video to your students. After they've predicted what they think the ocean says, they can then listen to the ocean speaking on your phone. It's a very nice experience to learn more about nature and to understand what we're doing to it. So tasks with this could be predicting and then listening and checking. You could use it as a dictation. They're so beautifully spoken. You could dictate it quickly, play it through 2 or 3 times, see how much the learners can write. Or as a dictogloss, they can fill in the gaps between it. Or you can get students to write or speak role plays between those things like the sky and the coral reef, or the wave and the mountain. Have a look at those later, please. Here's a nice story, which, a nice slide, which tells a story. If you think of typical classroom activities where the teacher says, A, name 10 irregular verbs, and we look at the faces of the students, they're all really quite bored and not interested at all. The teacher is also quite bored and in the traditional teacher mode of just checking, no, wrong, not much energy in that classroom. These pictures were taken by Dr. Harry Kucha, who was the president of IATEFL. He's done a lot of work in Cameroon, and he turned it all on its head by going into the class instead and saying, tell us a short story. And look at the faces of the kids on the right. They're all really involved now. They all engaged. They all want to tell a short story. And the teacher is far more interested as well. It turns out that lots of irregular verbs are used in short stories. So that is contextualizing and the power of putting things into a story, which works just as well for the Sustainable Development Goals. We need to engage students, don't we, with something real and authentic. We can link the Sustainable Development Goals to English language and skills by, for example, telling the story of something in your fridge, maybe some milk. Where did it come from? What's the story? Where was it produced? How was it transported? Yeah. Something in your cupboard, maybe a tin of beans, for example. Where was the tin made? Where were the beans grown? The story, the history of it. Something in your bag, like a pen, for example. Where was it made? Where did the ink come from? Think about the story of these things. Students can tell or write or research, and then you can integrate maybe vocabulary of, for example, food or processes. You can integrate grammar, past tenses in the story, or the passives. It was built, it was made, it was packed, it was transported. A good writing task to do with these is to do parallel writing, where you write a model of the story of one of the things, for example, your pen, and then you feed in lots of useful language that they need, and then they can write the same story of theirs, copying yours, but making changes. And then speaking, the SDGs are really useful for making public speaking, telling a story of one of these things, adding to confidence, debating, and arguments. I think arguments are very good to bring into class as long as they are polite and respectful. And the Sustainable Development Goals are things that people have often very differing opinions about. One final task, and this is using these participatory tools. I wonder if you still have that piece of paper. If you had one at the beginning, can you turn it over? And on your paper, I'd like you to draw a simple tree, like this picture here. Just a trunk in the middle, branches at the top, and roots at the bottom. Now, this is a great task to do in groups, and you can divide your class into groups of 3 or 6 or 7, depending on how big your class is. And you can get them to do a tree of causes and effects. You can do it with anything. You could, for example, decide on one of your original local or global problems. You can be guided by the students in your class if you've done the hand task before. And then for that problem, label the roots of the tree as causes and the branches as the effects. For example, something like poverty is a problem in many, many areas. What are the causes of poverty? Is it, for example, greed of some people? Is it, for example, government restricting funding? Is it all of these different things? It's not a superficial, easy answer, is it? There's lots of different causes. And what are the effects of poverty? Does it stunt education? Does it stop the country developing? All of these things. So this is not for primary school children, but maybe for those who are more advanced and looking at digging really deeply into these topics. When groups have done their tree, I don't know if you're doing your own tree now, they can present it to another pair or to another group, and this is good presentation skills. These visual or graphic designs are wonderful for doing group work and getting students to work together on something. And here are some others, other participatory tools. They engage students, get them to participate. They explore things. It's a structured way of exploring something, and they're student-centered, which is what we want in class. If they speak their own language, doesn't matter, We can even bring in translanguaging and get people to translate where they need to, but they're engaged in these tasks, and the final version will be in English. Other images we can use are all listed here. For example, the river for development along a particular problem. For example, the development of climate change. You could do a river development, what happened maybe 100 years ago and how that has developed. Balloons and stones, write your dreams in the balloons and what stops you in the stones. The chasm and the bridge, there's a problem in the middle. What's going to get from one side to the other? And I like the leaky pot here. Maybe this is about something like corruption, where all the money is going out and not going where it should be going to. Please try some of these participatory tools. And then over to Joseph to summarize.
Yeah, now we're about to wrap up. We've tried to cover most of the sustainable development goals in our today's discussion, especially by answering questions like, can you go to the next slide, Linda? By answering questions like what, who, when, why, where, and how. As to the question what is sustainable development goal and where did it go to where? So it deals with the historical development from Millennium Development Goals to Sustainable Development Goals of 2030. As to like the who, it could be teachers or learners. When, it's about the time appropriateness. It could be during warmers or, like she said, dig deeper. The why question, it's about the importance of the sustainable development or incorporating sustainable development goals in our ELT classroom. So there are like various importances about this one. For example, it can be used locally or globally. It about its relevancy because it's very, very real and other reasons. The other point is where. The other point is where it could be a classroom, outside the classroom, in a school, outside the school, and others. Last point is about somebody. Can you mute yourself, please? The last point is how. The how question. You can use a number of ways to deliver the sustainable development goal in your classroom. Like Linda mentioned earlier, it could be in the form of definition or matching or project work and others too. And the last slide, Linda. These are like the major points that we've shared to you. We've shared about the various tasks that you can carry out in your classroom, the resources that you can investigate and use them in a classroom as well, approach that can suit the sustainable development goals. Under the tasks to try out, we've mentioned like problem, hand, radical, phenology, the ocean. The last one is tree. It's about the causes and effects. Under the resources that teachers can investigate and then use it into their classroom, there are like webinars to watch and to learn a lot out of them, and lesson plans to try out in a classroom. The publication to download, especially you remember the two publications which are very interesting. The one which talks about the collaborative learning, and the other one is about the sustainable development goals. The fourth one is websites that teachers can explore. The last major point for our today's discussion is the approach that suit with the sustainable development goals. How can you or how do you approach the sustainable development? You can be creative. You can use stories, imagination, or there is another very important thing that is cooperative learning. And the last point is about participatory tools. So those were the major takeaways or major points that we have covered in our today's webinar. Thank you very much. That's all from Mr. Joseph. Thank you. If you have any question, you are really, really welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Joseph and Linda, for your spectacular presentation. It was the webinar about sustainable development goals, so that if you have any question or suggestion, you can react on this. Maybe Mr. Ababo has collected and summarized some questions. So if you have anything, Mr. Ababo, please forward to us, or for Mr. Joseph or Linda. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was really awesome. And development, sustainable development goals. These are my issues, your issues, her issues, and everybody's issues. That makes it to be worth presenting, worth talking, and worth bringing into the classroom. There is only one question that I have noticed. This is from Ayatomi. How does peeling the onion works in the classroom?
Shall I take that one? Shall I take that? Because that's from my slide and the participatory tools.
Sure, name that.
Okay. Peeling the onion is, you do, instead of drawing a tree, you draw an onion on a piece of paper, and you do this in groups. And as you know, in an onion, if you slice it in half, you have lots of different layers of the onion inside. And this is about getting to the heart of an issue. Now, we did this in London with groups in class on the topic of racism. And what are all the different layers of racism? All my students in groups, they were talking about different experiences they've had, for example, of racism, and they put them around the outside of the onion. And then they were looking at why that example of racism happened, and they were getting deeper and deeper and deeper into the core of the problem. And this was excellent, because my students were discovering why racism exists, how they could stop it, and what they can do in future. So this was a very empowering thing. So peeling the onion, draw half an onion, label it, get students to label it and discover more about it. There's a few people with hands up. Joseph, would you like to ask? There's Sebastian, Alex, and Musa with their hands up here. Would you like to ask them?
Sure. So can they forward their question then? Sebastian?
They can unmute themselves if they want to ask the question.
Sebastian, unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Well, thank you so much, both Joseph and Linda. That has been a really, really brilliant presentation. My name is Mahamba Sebastian. I'm from Tanzania. Well, yeah. I've been following the whole presentation, and I think in the last slide, actually, that Joseph was really summarizing about where, when, how, those WH questions. I still have a question. When you told me about the Sustainable Development Goals part of, we decided like a new millennium, it went to 17 goals. Now we have, in which the 17 goals really targeted the 2030. And now we are heading to 2063. So is there any setback, especially in Sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America, that actually has been facing challenges? And that's why these goals are right now heading to 2063. Are there some challenges that actually you think are appearing, especially in education, Agenda 4.7 of Education for Sustainable Development Goals? What can we do really to make sure we take off in this part so that this mission could be fulfilled within the time? Thank you.
Can I jump in here? I think this is really a policy issue, Sebastian. This goes way beyond the remit of most teachers, I think, and this is more a government issue of how they're going to achieve these things. This webinar was mainly for teachers and how they can bring the goals into class to raise awareness of students, I think. And you're right. There are so many issues that the countries and all these countries are not going to achieve, but we can't do all of it. We can start, we can raise awareness, we can bring them into class as teachers. I really think the governments need to play a huge role in achieving these. What do you think, Joseph? Do you agree?
Oh, yeah, I do agree. Like, if we remember, like the 19th ordinary session of the Africa Ministerial Conference on Environment took place here in Addis Ababa from, it was like from August 14 to 18. So the main issue was to provide policy guidance for the upcoming key environment events. But parallelly, they were talking about others, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, their progress, how they are going as well. But the point is that so far, the objective is like to achieve the 2030, the United Nations Development Goals. And he was talking, Mahamba Sebastian from Uganda, he was talking about, you know, the other point, like because Africa has the 2060 agenda, where they are going to achieve a number of things. This is quite different from the United Nations. But still, you know, a lot of things have been going on all over the world, and all countries or majority of the countries have been implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. But as I have stated before, the progress is not as expected to meet, you know, the 2030 agenda all over the world. But it's not only for Africa, for the entire world. They need to put a lot of efforts to achieve the 2030 agenda. The same is true if you bring it to the classroom situation, to the education sector, right? So I think it's going to be very difficult to say that the progress is exactly here or there, especially more of it might be, like you say, politics, right? So that's what I would like to say.
Yeah, I know, like in the UK, for example, we're nowhere near achieving them. You would think the UK would be, because we have money and development, but we're nowhere near achieving them. The government doesn't even want to. So it's up to people here to protest and tell the government that we have to make some sort of changes.
Mm-hmm.
Can we have a question from one of the ladies next? Sarah or Samira, would you like to unmute?
Yes.
Samira? Or Sarah?
Oh, yes.
Sarah. Please go ahead. Please.
Oh yeah. You're talking about the onion illustration. Do you have a link to it, or can you at least a picture? Because I didn't quite get it, how the whole process moves, you know, from, I think it's a narrowing process, is it? I would just like to understand. It's very interesting. I don't know if you have a link to it, or
there's no link. There used to be a website with all these tools on it with pictures. If you want to email me, I can give you more information. So my email is lindaruas@hotmail.com if you want more information.
It was wonderful having a meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a lovely moment. Rinda and Joseph, thank you so much.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Joseph. That was really nice.
Thank you for the magnificent presentation. Thank you. Have a good night.